A Democratic landslide in Charlotte with dramatic changes to both the Charlotte City Council and our Charlotte Mecklenburg School Board. We talk politics today here at the State of Mecklenburg on CLT Blog. Joining me today at the State of Mecklenburg is, to my far left, Steve Harrison, reporter from the Charlotte Observer. To my immediate left, City Council Member Warren Cooksey, Republican from District 7. To my immediate right, Joel Ford, former Democratic Party chairman. And to my far right, Brad Broders from News 14 Carolina. Now, guys, let's go around the table real quick. We had an absolutely crazy election night last night. What was the most surprising thing to you, Steve?
It would have to be Beth Pickering getting the 4th at-large seat for Charlotte City Council. That, I think, kind of stunned everyone. And I think that happened because, she rode the mayor's coattails. That was half of it, but the other half was that Republican voters didn't show up. Edwin Peacock, I think, got 35,000 votes last night and got 50,000 2 years ago.
Yep.
Right.
So I don't think anyone went in the booth, or hardly anyone went in the booth upset with Edwin Peacock about something he did and voted against him. I think they just didn't show up.
Warren?
Well, that's it. I think it's not that hardly anyone went in the booth angry at Edwin Peacock. It's hardly anyone went in the booth. I can't add much to that. It's the same. Going to be the same thing. Losing Edwin Peacock is just. I don't get it.
Joel?
It's a great day to be a Democrat.
Jeez,
What surprised me the most was that you now have 4 Democrats at large on the Charlotte City Council. I'm not sure if anybody could predict that, but for someone like Beth Pickering, who is a fine person, but to have right around less than $2,000 and to win a city council at large seat, clearly she had to have some help.
I certainly think it was a bad day for local Republicans. Obviously, you look at the trend; it was from 7-4 majority in 07. It's now then it was 8-3 in 09, and now it's an unprecedented 9-2 advantage for Democrats rather on the city council. So I think it was a bad night for Republicans, and I think what Steve was saying, obviously, turnout was a huge factor, and that really helped the Democrats and really hurt the Republicans.
Yeah, well, and then let's talk about turnout for a minute. We had 16.2% turnout. Traditionally, turnout for Charlotte City Council races on the off years were somewhere between 24 and 21. Sometimes if there's a very, very big bond issue, they go a little bit higher. But 16.2%. Most people would think that would favor Republicans. Steve, why do you think it didn't?
I think part of it is that right. That's the usual story is that low turnout favors Republicans, but I think the Fox campaign did such a great job getting their voters out, and especially early. When you started looking at the early voting numbers, you could see this coming. It was devastating for the Republicans. I mean, the Democrats were so outperforming where they should be, and then Republicans never caught up.
Well, I want to correct the outperforming bit because actually all parties underperformed based on just looking at 09. The only candidate to get more votes this year than 2 years ago was Anthony Fox by a couple thousand. Across the board in the districts and in the at-large races, vote totals down considerably. If you look at, and yes, I'm going to spin this as a Republican the best I can to preserve some response from poor turnout on my side of the aisle, but with what was it, a 6-to-1 fundraising advantage, a 10-to-1 phone call advantage because Scott Stone was talking about making 20,000 phone calls and the mayor's campaign made 200,000. The margin was 2-to-1 and no more Democrats turned out this year than 2 years ago. So all that effort was made on the Democratic side to maintain turnout, whereas what happened on the Republican side is ours got cut by almost a half. And you can see that also in the straight ticket voting numbers, where the Democrat straight ticket voting numbers are different from 2 years ago by about 2,000. The Republican number is down by 8,000.
Yeah, Warren, but I think you have to take a look at just recent history. 2 years ago, John Lasseter raised almost as much money as Mayor Fox did. So I think that the Republican ticket and the candidates have to take responsibility for what they did not do. One, with the work ethic that they did not display. Two, with the messaging. I don't think that their message really resonated really in a moderate city and in a moderate county. I really think that this was an election that was really up for grabs. I think the Democrats wanted it more. They were hungrier. They worked hard. They made phone calls. They knocked on their base's doors to get out their vote. And, you know, regardless of the turnout of 16.2%, which is low, but they did enough to win and win convincingly that they took 4. Traditionally, we've had a 2-2 split, and then most recently we had 3 Democrats, 1 Republican. This, to me, I think you have to take inventory within your own party and within your own party values about who it is you say that you are.
And
but you have to wonder though what effect Scott Stone his turnout was far less than John Lasseter, and you have to wonder you have to wonder how much trickle down effect, because like Steve was saying, Edwin Peacock was a moderate Republican, popular from both parties. You wonder what kind of trickle down effect that had for voters, Republican voters, not being that excited to cast a ballot for Scott Stone as opposed to John Lasseter, and really you can see that affected Edwin Peacock.
And that's the issue. The issue has always been. Well, go ahead.
Well, I want to be very overt that I'm spinning here, but the narrative I'm trying to present is that yesterday was more of a Republican loss than a Democratic victory, because to me, calling a Democratic victory would be based on seeing some increased numbers in Democratic turnout, and we didn't see that. We saw the Democratic Party, yes, worked hard, had a consistent message, had a great effort, 10-to-1 advantage in phone calls, 6-to-1 advantage in fundraising, 2-to-1 advantage in the vote totals for mayor, but the absolute numbers of people turning out slightly less than 2 years ago. Republicans collapsed 2 years ago. Yeah, I'll own that, absolutely, but that's a Republican loss.
I wonder if that Mayor McCrory, won so many elections so easily that the local kind of Republican Party establishment. I mean, I think
that's exactly it.
Gotten, I don't know if I want to use lazy. That may be too strong of a word, but there's something when you win so easy for so long, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into a competitive race, and it's been 2 now that the party is underperformed.
And to Steve's point, I think Republicans are facing even more headwinds this year because we get the Charlotte's Award of the Democratic National Convention. Obviously, Mayor Fox benefited greatly from that. You saw his donations, a lot of, he in 09, he obviously had a lot of out-of-state donations too. Not a whole lot, but still he had a national reach from his background in New York law and doing that. But I really think he got a huge advantage from that. He was a face of this convention push, and the nation saw him as he was pushing Charlotte for the nation to see. I think
and that's my question. My question becomes, because the theory was 2 years ago that John Lasseter did not turn out enough conservative Republicans to win.
It was a theory.
Well, it was a theory. That was the popular theory among conservative Republicans. Well, now they got their wish. They got their conservative candidate who was chucking red meat the entire time, but he didn't have a GOTV effort, raised what? Almost a sixth of what Anthony raised.
No, he was not chucking red meat. This is a progressive city that we live in. You can't just throw out that you're going to cut $72 million from the operating budget from the city council and not figure out how you're going to do it. And so when you talk about how you balance a budget with $72 million less money and talk about police and fire, and he can't answer the question, that message did not resonate with the city of Charlotte.
Joel, he's not talking about the city of Charlotte. He's talking about the base.
I'm talking about the base.
That's exactly
he was
the
chucking,
kind of thing.
he was chucking red meat out to the base.
Because again, if one of the narratives from 09 was conservatives saying, "Well, John Lasseter didn't do enough to appeal to conservatives to run." He was, there was no apparent difference allegedly 2 years ago between Fox and
what
Lasseter.
I'm saying to you is, you don't elect a Republican mayor for 14 years in a Democratic controlled city unless you are a moderate.
And we agree with you.
Yeah.
And Joel, we are all going to agree with you on that one.
But unlike Scott Stone, John Lasseter had years of experience, elected experience. He was seen in the community as both the vice chair of the CMS school board and as a longtime member of the Charlotte City Council. He had the base. He had support from the city. He ran things. He made decisions at both the school and the city level. That was a huge plus. Scott Stone just didn't have that experience.
So let's turn it around. If the argument from my fellow conservatives from 2 years ago was that John didn't do enough to turn out conservatives, the counter argument you can offer today is that a Republican candidate who created a campaign geared more towards attracting conservative votes couldn't turn out moderates.
And that's the question, because the one thing that we all know from early voting was that it was down 25%. But here was the thing. There was not down among African-American voters. African-American voters made up 54% of the early vote total. And then I haven't gotten a chance to look at the demographic numbers. I don't think they've come out yet, but I bet you that number carries.
And I was there, and Joel, you were there too on the first day, October 20th, the first day of early voting at the Hal Marshall Center. Anthony Fox had a lot of supporters out there, and maybe not a lot, but for the first day of early voting, he had a pretty sizable audience. There was energy. There was, Scott Stone was also there, but you could tell there was just a difference in turnout and also a difference in energy, and I really think that was a microcosm of the early voting and then the general election turnout.
I think it's interesting to ask, kind of looking backwards, if, Scott Stone ran a pretty aggressive campaign, and so some people are saying, oh, he, kicked the hornet's nest, and so Anthony, really, they got after it in terms of get out the vote. But, I don't know. I think maybe the mayor was going to try and run up the score.
No matter what.
Regardless. So, because he won close 2 years ago, and this is your first chance to make. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know if there would have been any difference who was running.
No, and I agree with you for that.
Phone calls and
13% of the early vote was white Democrats. And I think if you look at the turnout in District 6 City Council, District 5 County Commission, traditionally ran somewhere in the 40 to 50% neighborhood. Those precincts would turn out on those levels. Well, this year, if you go back and look at the map, they have dropped. They've gone from 40 and 50% turnout to 30 and 20% turnout. It's a drastic decrease. And the question becomes now for the Republican Party in Charlotte. I mean, forget the city council races. You lost the city council races based on Fox's ability to turn people out because Anthony did a great job doing that.
No.
Credit to him.
No. If the vote totals are the same or less, it's more that Republicans couldn't turn out people to vote.
Okay, that's true.
That's the emphasis I want to put here.
But it's both, because when you have a non-competitive election,
well,
Anthony's people are going to be
But
complacent.
Warren,
Well, let me give you
what you're not
comparison.
saying is you're not taking responsibility for the candidate that you guys put
saying-
up.
yeah,
that
he couldn't
candidate,
turn out- he
that
couldn't turn out
candidate-
Republicans.
the
Of course
candidate
I
did
am.
not resonate with anyone.
That's
No.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's a Republican loss.
So how do we win? How do you do it? How does the
But
Republican...
let me give you a parallel here. Here's a parallel. Look at 95 and 97. McCrory's first run for re-election. Democrats don't have a candidate. The guy that they ran, Jim Harwood, was a Lyndon LaRouche Democrat, was a joke. And you see a fascinating parallel. McCrory ups his vote total from 95 to 97 by 5,000 votes. Harwood gets about half what Hoyle Martin got in 95, and Republicans take 3 of the 4 at-large seats. This, if we'd been doing this on the day after Election Day in 1997, I'd be saying it's a great day to be a Republican. This is now becomes a question of a pattern for a second term, a first re-election for a mayor, which we haven't had in years because of McCrory's long tenure. This is a city that we can talk about being moderate or a progressive origin. Another thing that is if you haven't screwed up, you get another chance to continue running. And Anthony not only hasn't screwed up, but he got all the halo of the DNC convention.
And that's the question now.
Yeah,
Will Anthony Fox be mayor until he decides to step down? That's a lot. What can if you think so, yes, or if not, what does the Mecklenburg County Party and future candidates need to do to even have a chance to challenge?
Well, obviously the demographics are changing. Obviously, there's more unaffiliated voters in Charlotte than there are registered Republicans. So I think obviously the numbers are hard to miss. I mean, you can't get past that fact. So. Right now it's the day after. Right now, the Ballantine area and the Myers Park is where Republicans are the strongest. The question is, how do they get those seats back in other areas of the city, facing the realities of the registered voters' numbers?
It's not just that. I mean, I think that unaffiliateds are up, but I think the bigger thing is that registered Republicans continue to drop, white voters continue to drop as a percentage, and so with each election that goes by, I think. It becomes harder for Republicans to win citywide.
One of the things that we're not talking about, and this is a preview of what the census data has already shown us. The demographics of this city have changed. They're not changing, they have changed.
Changed.
Well, let me ask it this way in terms of future, because one of the things, if you look at cities around the country, you find precious few Republicans involved in government at all. Why would a Republican want to live in Charlotte? What is the value proposition for holding a person who, small businessman, middle management, that type? Why would a Republican want to live in Charlotte?
If you're, but that's the question. But I think we're getting away from the issue that I think ultimately, in the end, if you look at this from a standpoint of Charlotte, let's step away from the party standpoint and come back to what's best for Charlotte. Anthony deserved another term. I didn't vote for him because I'm a Republican. I supported Scott, but Anthony did deserve another term. He didn't really screw up anything. Now the question becomes now, at what point for your city council races? Because as much as Anthony is a great figure for the city and helping promote business and helping the city prosper, the actual decisions are made by our council. Now we have replaced a sitting council member who had years of experience, not only just through himself, but also with a history with his father serving on council, Edwin Peacock III. And we have replaced him and filled an empty seat with 2 new individuals. Claire Fallon does have the experience to be able to step in immediately. Beth Pickering doesn't. And and you can argue that Beth Pickering rode Anthony's coattails to victory. So at what point do you think that's good for the city, that she was able to do so from a policy and future standpoint? Or do you think that the city might suffer from a lack of experienced leadership on the council?
Absolutely. There won't be, the city of Charlotte's not going to suffer from one person, one person's inexperience. And I question Claire's ability to step in right away. The city is so much larger than zoning.
Right.
So there's going to be a learning curve for quite a few people. And to be perfectly honest with you, there's some people on council now who are still learning. So, but one of the things that I'm very comfortable with, and I've spent at least 6 years by being on the PCAC, Privatization Competition Advisory Committee, we have a very talented staff. So I'm confident more so in the staff of the city of Charlotte's ability to help bring along our council members than I am concerned about really a strong city manager form of government than a strong council form of government, which is what we currently have.
Well, I cover Mecklenburg County Commission as well, and obviously there was a little bit of a turnover a couple of years ago, and there was that first planning retreat a couple months in. There was definitely a learning curve. There was kind of the city manager reminding, "Hey, look at your memos. That, we're here to inform you." I'm
trying to basically pulling a Gorman and protecting staff from councils.
I'm just being honest. There was definitely a learning curve, and there's 11, so with 4 new members coming in, that's give or take a third of the new council. So and it's also you have the mix of 2 new at-large citywide members as well as 2 new district members. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out. But certainly some big issues like transit and with a veto-proof +2. It's going to be really interesting to see what opposition will there be from the Republicans and what issues can bring Democrats.
From both of us, you mean?
And what issues can bring Democrats over to join an opposition.
This goes in the policy weeds a little bit, but I didn't see all of the mayor's speech last night, but I think one of the first things he said, he brought up consolidation again, which is like,
whoa, we're going there again?
Right.
He's been talking about it and hasn't gotten any traction because, you guys are not interested.
And what will be the county's response to that?
But now...
But it's interesting. You got a Republican shaking that off. You got a Republican on the panel here shaking off consolidation.
Consolidation doesn't happen. It just doesn't.
But what I'm saying is now you've got some new council members who
Can
are
it
going to
happen?
look to the
Can
mayor.
it happen now?
They're going to look to the mayor for guidance. They're going to look to staff partially, but mostly they're going to look to the mayor. And so, can he now bring enough people to put? And then they put pressure on the manager to get after.
And what realistically consolidation can we see? I know we talk about functional, but
future discussion, state of Mecklenburg.
We'll do consolidation. But my question becomes now: do you think that business folks? Because look, the development community did not back Claire or Beth. They backed Edwin and Curtis. Do you see them being able to work with Claire and Beth on council? Do you see more projects in the future, or do you see developers in this city possibly looking at this result and saying, "We're done, we're out"? We just had a brand new tree ordinance that makes development more expensive. We just had the post-construction control ordinance reviewed, and it's not changing. The urban street design guidelines are going to make construction and development even more expensive, and now there's possibly going to be coming down the pipeline more things that might make development more expensive. Will that change
their guy
their
in
ways?
2009 was John.
Yeah.
They gave him the money, he lost. They seem perfectly fine with giving Anthony tons of money this time. I mean,
No, he's right.
So that's what's going to happen.
Anthony did get that one check back, though.
Yeah, he did give the Rebic check back.
So I think
Space. Yes.
in 2 years, I think
And rightfully so. He should have given it back.
Beth may get a lot of money. Claire may get the money.
That was an insult to the mayor, to our mayor.
Okay.
Well, and now the focus, we're looking towards the future. How does this play for 2012? Because obviously we know that in 2008, President Obama, won Mecklenburg County. Governor Perdue won Mecklenburg County. So if you're a Democrat, do you feel good? Does this make you feel better that President Obama can carry North Carolina again? Because obviously Mecklenburg County is his bread and butter. If he's got to have Democrats come out, and obviously Mayor Fox and got some of that national support. How will that carry over?
Brad, I'll tell you, I mean, this was really a test model. We used a lot of new technologies and, believe it or not, some new techniques, and we're looking to bring this statewide. So I can tell you right now that this was a good day for us yesterday, and we're looking to build upon the successes that we had here in Mecklenburg County across the state, which is the reason why I'm more concerned now about what the speaker's going to do with what I call this voter suppression bill. because there's clearly an agenda from the Republicans in Raleigh to eliminate straight party ticketing. And I think that would be a key factor in hurting some of our efforts, in addition to eliminating early voting and suppressing some of the time in which in which North Carolinians have the ability to vote.
But Joel, here's a question for the panel. In fact, straight party voting seems to fall along the idea that a partisan decision is the most important one when you go to the ballot box, and denies the idea that perhaps voting for an individual who is best for the office as opposed to a party official is true. So, and I'm just bear with me here. I'm not taking this as a Republican. I'm saying this as just a North Carolinian. Wouldn't it be better for voters to go to the box informed on the individuals and not just have a party tell them who to vote for?
One of the things that you and the arguments that the right likes to make about this whole straight party ticket voting, you have the option. You can vote for the individual, or you can vote for straight party ticketing, which is a choice in this democracy in which we live in.
Then let me ask you this: if that's the principle at stake, why is the presidential election not part of straight ticket voting in North Carolina?
You have to ask the architects of our system.
Oh, well, I know. My recollection is that the reason because it used to be, the reason it was taken out was following Reagan, because the Democratic General Assembly at the time feared that, well, if there's a strong Republican at the top of the ticket, we'll lose if it's if they're included in the straight party voting.
Now we're moving into General Assembly. We're gonna let's back up. Let's back up. All right. So we had
how many? I'd be interested in knowing. I haven't researched it. How many states have straight ticket voting, and how many don't?
That's going to be for
going
to be for
But
another
just so
day.
you know, you're clear. I mean, I think matter of fact, I know the Democrats are prepared to go either way, because at the end of the day, it's about turnout and education.
And that's the key. I mean,
it's
we saw
about turnout and education.
We saw a decrease in turnout.
Right, and I think like moving forward to 2012 for the presidential, it will be interesting to see who the Republicans nominate, because if you remember last election, when John McCain had basically the nomination sewn up, he still only got 70-something% of voters in North Carolina. Huckabee got a huge chunk of the vote when the race was all but over. So who can the Republicans nominate that will resonate in the South and really get, just like George W. Bush did in 2000 and 2004, carrying the state easily? That'll be an interesting question.
And that's the question I think has to be asked.
Who will be the best candidate for North Carolina and the New South?
And it's not just, and it's funny because I quoting Karl Rove here, the Republican Party has got to realize they have got to stop. I mean, just to win, just to even compete next year. Because if this is the GOTV effort we're going to see in just Charlotte, and it's going to be taken statewide, the Republicans have got to start thinking, guys, we cannot just focus on these counties where we can win and not have any type of infrastructure in the 8 city areas. Except for Greensboro and Wilmington, I think the others now just recently shifted to Democratic control.
And President Obama did great in Asheville. Probably not coincidental.
Exactly.
That was one of his stops on his bus tour a couple weeks back.
Yeah, so we've got to start. I mean, for the Republicans to even have a shot of any kind, they've got to lose by less.
I hear you loud and clear, but you remember when the president came to North Carolina here recently in Wilkes County?
Yeah.
Most people don't realize that that's a conservative county. He did extremely well there.
They went highly for McCain in 2008.
Yeah, so let's talk about Patrick Cannon, more than likely to be mayor pro tem, correct?
Yep.
We have Claire Fallon, who won, Beth Pickering, who won, David Howard, who won. David, those are the individuals who were going to be at large. Patsy Kenzie was carried.
Let me interject here. Don't automatically assume that Patrick Cannon is going to be the mayor pro tem. I know what the traditional top vote getters have gone, but it'll be interesting to see if Patrick Cannon has the relationships now with the new folks to be able to get those votes.
That's a good.
There are 4 new members.
There are 4 new members.
There's a different voting
block.
So
with that being said, who? If it's not Patrick, then who?
Well, I mean, I think you got to consider David Howard.
It would be Patrick or David.
Patrick or David.
I think you have to consider David Howard.
Over it a little bit.
Yeah.
And
so
even
just keep your eye out for that. That's not a shoe-in.
And that's okay. And congratulations to Patsy Kenzie, James Mitchell, LaWanna Mayfield, Michael Barnes, John Autry, Warren Cooksey, and Andy Doolin on being reelected to the Charlotte City Council.
Yeah, write-in was not an effective
Oh, no, it was not an effective
Write-in is
candidate.
never an effective opponent.
And John Autry will be interesting to see. Obviously, Nancy Carter represented that district since 1999, so there'll be a new face on East Charlotte, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. With
Right.
And new face for West Charlotte with
new
LaWanna
faces for
Mayfield.
Southwest
Very
Charlotte
different
as well.
from Warren
Definitely.
And to be perfectly frank, John Autry and LaWanna Mayfield, between those two candidates, they're both educated. David Peterson and John Autry both were educated, both were aware of what goes on in the city. I don't think the city loses on either one of those individuals. I think John's a good pickup. LaWanna, also educated, also well aware of what's going on. I think she's prepared to walk in. And now here's the question, though. Did the fact that the Republicans ran races in heavily Democratic districts, help them turn out their vote, and the fact that the Democrats did not challenge District 6 and District 7, where Republicans traditionally turn out heavy, did that have a factor in the voter turnout?
I don't know. I mean, you look at each of these districts. It was not even close for any district. I mean, I just think that's just realities of the demographics within each districts. I think, like you were saying, there were some qualified opposition candidates in those fields, but it's just the demographics of that I think played out.
It's the reality we're going to be
and
facing.
after what happened in Andy's race in 2009, when the Democrats had a pretty good candidate who worked hard.
Yeah, Jane Botchell.
Jane
He worked really hard, and it was like it didn't matter.
73%.
It was no
73%.
different than your race. It was
Exactly.
kind of like
That was a very good
the
observation.
tree falling
Yeah.
in the woods or
I
whatever.
mean, because she was really our ideal candidate in a lot of different ways in terms of running a candidate. She was conservative. She's a business person. She's a mom. So, I mean, it did not resonate with those voters.
Well, case in point, Beth Pickering lives in Ballantyne, which is in District 7, and ran at large.
And she talked a lot about
Yeah.
representing beyond
Yeah.
uptown Charlotte,
Yeah.
the greater Charlotte area.
Well, we wish them all well, and
Thank
the
you.
council has now changed. But Charlotte Mecklenburg School Board also had an election this last evening, and we had a surprising, not for some surprising, but surprising results to those who were following the endorsements. We had 4 individuals endorsed by the Observer who were top money getters. We had Lee Stashew leading the field in funds. We had Tim Morgan coming in second, with Aaron Pomus leading in third, and Erica coming in fourth. But the 4 endorsed by the Observer were Pomus, Dashew, Ellis Stewart, and Morgan, but the ultimate victors were Tim Morgan in third, Mary McCrae in second, and Erica Ellis Stewart in first by a wide margin.
Well, and I know you represent Tim Morgan closely.
course, yeah.
Obviously, he represents
Yeah, you got to get that disclosure.
Oh yeah, I got to get that disclosure in.
We
don't
should
I?
also disclose you were working
Working
for
with
Curtis
Curtis
Watkins at large, too.
Full
Absolutely.
disclosure here.
Yeah.
But, obviously, Tim Morgan, it was a gamble, especially in this election, if you look at the numbers, for him as a Republican. I know it's a nonpartisan board, but, he did lean Republican. For him to step out of his district seat and run at large, not citywide, but obviously countywide. A little bit of a gamble, but it paid off for him. And so, obviously, it's going to be interesting because we have a whole new slate of at-large candidates. Obviously, huge new superintendent will be their legacy in a lot of ways, and they've got some huge decisions coming up. And really, there'll be likely a new chair. It's just going to be a whole different makeup of that board, and we'll see what their priorities are moving forward. Obviously, a lot of different faces and ideas for that matter.
Electorally, from a numbers standpoint, from a consultant standpoint, Joel, why do you think that Erica and Mary were able to resonate more with voters than Aaron was? Because all 3 of them were endorsed by the Mecklenburg County Democratic Party, but Aaron did not seem to be able to pick up the voter finish. Why do you think that was?
I think the key difference is that Erica and Mary embraced the local party. And the local party obviously is tied at the hip to the mayor. So all of that momentum was brought down. And I think Aaron being new, and technically, school board is nonpartisan, but at the end of the day, and I've always told these candidates, you have to align yourself with groups that have the ability to get out the vote. And typically, that's going to be the local parties and some of these other auxiliary groups that are in our city. But if you don't have enough resources on your own, which clearly he did not, in terms of organization and money, to get out that vote in a countywide race, which is a huge endeavor.
race.
Oh,
huge
yeah.
endeavor. And Aaron's a great guy. Matter of fact, I am still a huge fan and support of his. But at the end of the day, you have to have resources that will resonate with a county, and it just didn't work for him.
And let's be honest, obviously from a media perspective, I've interviewed Mary McCrae a lot of times. I know your CMS, Observer beat reporters have interviewed. She was the head of the Teachers Association. She was the face when all the teacher layoff uncertainty was out there. She was out there. She was leading rallies. She was speaking to TV, print reporters. She was out there, and I really think she represented the local teachers union in a national level. In fact, I ran into her this summer when I was up in Chicago at a restaurant. So she was obviously had a lot of recognition, and I think that really helped her, especially with voters.
So the question becomes now that we have 5 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and one unaffiliated on the board. Who becomes chair for your school board?
I think right now there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure on Erica Ellis Stewart. She had 35,000 votes, which is more than any other at-large candidate to step up and be chair. It'll be, in my opinion, a maturity decision on hers. First of all, I think Eric Davis is doing a fantastic job. He's got some experience and he has some momentum, but I do believe there's going to be some community pressure for her to step up and to try to lead. And she's got to recognize within herself, is she ready for prime time? I mean, that camera's going to be there in terms of those decisions, and also the parents and the business community who are going to be coming at her looking for leadership and answers about the future and the direction of this school board. You know, I think it may be wise, and again, this is a call that she's going to have to make, if she would sit back and take it all in before she stepped out there, because you realize that this is a 4-year term and not 2. So it'll be interesting.
And there's some divisive issues that are coming up, though.
And so Steve, going forward, covering the covering the city council, the school board, just from a print perspective, the Observer covered the elections pretty well. News 14 did a great job covering the elections. Carolina did a great job covering the elections. Do you think this is the new normal? Is 16.5% in our off-year elections, are these the new normal, guys? And going forward, can we expect to see these kind of results in the future?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, I really think that Deems aren't whichever party's in power in the mayorship. I think that depends on how viable and electable that opposition party is. And I think John Lasseter was seen in many eyes as potentially winning. I was there in 09. That was a race that was down to the wire. I mean, we were waiting for those last precincts to come in. It was within 2-3%. It was going back and forth. You were wondering which South precincts hadn't voted yet. It was like maybe Lasseter could swing this. It was really close. You know, I just think I just don't. There was not enough opposition that enough people felt like we can come out and really help this guy win. And I think that affected.
I'll give a theory that, I mean, I think what Brad said, that's most of it, that it wasn't competitive. But I think, like on the TV side, you know, people have more channels to watch. So I think fewer people are watching the local news. Definitely fewer people are getting the print paper. And the print paper is like I always kind of call it a nag to vote. You know, because we run a lot of like
a lot of
spin-off
profiles.
stories.
Yeah.
You know, like these are, you know, that interesting, but you know, it's good for you. And so when you don't get the print paper, when you're watching other stuff, different more channels than TV news, I just don't think people are exposed to as much election coverage as they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so I think with a race that doesn't have a lot of big issues, it's going to be hard to get people to vote.
And to our local mayor, Anthony Fox was all over the TV, all over the media.
Bought how much? Bought 200,000 worth in TV ads.
Yeah, and not just that. I mean, obviously he was out front on a lot of city issues, and then it just so happened that basically his whole term almost was dominated by, we became a finalist for the DNC in June of 2010, and there was a 9-month build-up, and there was a lot of opportunities for him to get out, push the city, push Charlotte, and I think that really helped him. Obviously, his face was out there, and he had a huge head start from compared to Scott Stone, who didn't really formally announce his candidate until late winter, early spring, and had less time to be out there.
I was just going to say real quickly, as it relates to the new normal, again, I think you have to go back and look at the census tract in terms of the change in demographics for the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. So I think this is going to be a continued trend. The other thing is the affluence in our city. I think the reason why, in some instances with local races at least, you've got some people in the community that the local races does not resonate well with them, because regardless what happens at mayor, regardless what happens at school board, they're going to be able to take care of their family by either moving out to the suburbs or by putting their kids in private school. So I think we have to balance all of that in terms of what the needs are and the changing demographics for our city.
But let's see though. I mean, you know, not apples to oranges comparing the local to the federal level, but obviously in 2010 there was like both houses of Congress in power, and the voters, you know, felt like they needed a little bit of a check on power. So we'll see if that wide 9-2 majority for Democrats on the city council. We'll see how that plays out. We'll see if voters want something new.
Well, two things. First of all, recognizing, of course, that the plural of anecdote is not data. I have a story from working at South Regional Library during early voting that is designed to make you two cringe. Actually, all of us, but especially you two. A person comes up to me. I'm going to make this as neutral as possible. Person comes up to me and says, "There's a primary going on." There's an election going on. I didn't know there was an election going on. I didn't even know there was a primary. I now know there was. You know, you've got to do more to get the word out. Why don't they tell us more about this? I said, well, you know, it's in the news. And this person responds, well, I don't watch TV news because it's too disappointing and it's all negative. And I don't take the paper because I don't trust it. I'm sitting there thinking, well, how do you expect to find out about what's going on in your... you know, whether
CLT
you,
blog.
yeah,
Yeah.
See you a lot. News 14 Carolina. the
News
Charlotte
14
Observer.
Carolina, Charlotte Observer, CLT blog.
This person was not in the CLT blog demographic, I must say. But the second thing, in terms of from an age perspective.
All right, go.
From an age perspective.
Well, what was the
Yeah.
September primary turnout? 3%?
3%.
That's pathetic.
Hey, look, 562 people can't be wrong.
All right. We're done.
But here's
We're done.
Mr. Cooksey had a primary.
Food for thought on the Republican candidate, on the future of Republican candidates at large in Charlotte. Here is the dilemma. On the campaign side, it has long been understood by Republican candidates that you cannot get elected with Republican votes alone. And that has been the case from McCrory's days and before, when it was a more Republican city. So what that creates is a Republican candidate with the potential to be successful who is of a moderate bent.
Which is the reason why I'm surprised that Peacock didn't get back
But
in.
here's the second part of it. What a Republican activist wants, what your core group of conservatives who make up the Republican
This is the
Party
insanity
want,
we have to put up with on a regular basis.
It is not insanity. It's perfectly logical. Republicans
it's
want
not
a Republican
successful.
candidate.
Not successful.
I didn't say it was
All that
successful.
matters is whether
Calm
it's successful.
It's not about. I'm not talking about success. I'm talking about the reality of what the Republican Party in Charlotte and Republican candidates and voters have to face is the candidate that if a Republican candidate cannot win with just Republican votes, but a Republican candidate who could attract other votes can't attract Republican votes at large. So why would a Republican want to live in Charlotte again? I leave that as the open question.
And with that, we're
Yeah.
going to go ahead and close it out. Guys, thank you very much for joining us. And congratulations to all of the winners for this year's elections. And it's going to be an extremely interesting next year as we see the new Charlotte City Council members and school board members begin to fulfill their duties next year. Thank you for joining us here at the State of Mecklenburg on CLT Blog. I'm Larry Shaheen. I'll see you next time. Thank you.